Support for the Q&A with A.P.C. is provided by the Massa Corporation. For 55 years, the Massa Corporation has provided companies with a complete line of printing solutions, from custom labels to contract packaging services, as well as packaging equipment and supplies. Proudly serving Virginia and its neighbors since 1961. Online at massacorp.com. This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you're listening to the Q&A with A.P.C., the show that features conversations with artists, cultural figures, policymakers, performers, and other innovators living in Virginia. Episode 28, live at Ironclad Distillery Company. In this special unedited live episode, I sit down with the family behind Ironclad Distillery Company in a Facebook live stream event recorded August 1st, 2017 at Ironclad Distillery in Newport News, Virginia. Steve, Kara, and Owen King give a behind-the-scenes peek at their distillery and provide tips on how to properly taste, order, and serve bourbon. Special guests include Dan Powell from Tradition Brewing Company, award-winning mixologist Robert Gregory, and Matt Jones, creator of Craft Cocktail Ice and owner of Chisel and Shaker. Welcome to Ironclad Distillery Company's very first live tasting event.
Woo!
I'm Andrew Paul Cronin, the host of the podcast, The Q&A with A.P.C. Coming up on today's show, we're going to meet the family behind Ironclad Distillery Company. We're going to talk about how to properly taste whiskey and have a live tasting right here with you at home. We're going to talk about Ironclad Distillery Company's barrel tagging program. We're going to meet Dan Powell from Tradition Brewing Company right here in Newport News, Virginia, who's reusing Ironclad bourbon barrels to make some fabulous beer. We'll talk to Robert Gregory, mixologist from Finn Seafood right here in Newport News, Virginia, about how to create the perfect summer bourbon cocktail. You'll get a behind-the-scenes peek at the distillery. We'll be taking your questions all night long on Facebook at Ironclad Distillery and on Twitter at Ironclad Bourbon. And of course, we're going to be telling you how you can invest in Ironclad Distillery Company's equity crowdfunding campaign by clicking on Invest in Ironclad at the top of your screen. Let's start by meeting the family behind Ironclad Distillery Company. We have Stephen King on the far end of the couch, founder and president. Steve.
Thank you.
Kara King in the middle, creative director.
Thanks.
How you doing, Kara?
Good to see you.
Good to see you again. And we have Owen King, head distiller here at Ironclad. We're going to start tonight with a bourbon tasting.
Let's pour it up.
Yeah, tonight we're tasting batch 9, which is about to hit ABC store shelves. When you're tasting whiskey, you really want to start with the glass. The glass is all important if you really want to experience what whiskey has to offer. The tulip shape is what you're looking for. So these are the tasting glasses we're going to have in our tasting room. And you can see it tapers off to a point because that's going to really draw the aromas up to your nose. And they're tasting from Glencairn glasses, which is kind of standard whiskey glass, but these work too. So glass is all important, and then what you're going to first look for is you don't have to swish it like you do wine. You're just going to kind of make it rock in the glass, and you're looking for what's called legs, and that's the stuff that sticks to the side of the glass. The skinny and faster they fall down, the younger the whiskey, the longer and fatter they are. They're slower because the oils have collected in from the barrel, so they've been sitting there for a long time collecting that. So that's how you can kind of tell the age of a whiskey. Then you're going to go for color.
So the most important thing about color is the paler the color, usually what that means is it's going to be the less time is spent in a barrel. But that can also have some degrees because there are char numbers for the barrel. So 100% of the color for the bourbon comes from the barrel. So they've got char number 1, 2, and 3. And then there's also extra dark and extra light, or not charred at all. So really what you're going to do is industry standards pretty much char number 3, and which is what Ironclad is. But the paler sometimes would either mean less char or less age in the barrel, and then the darker it gets, the more time it's had in the barrel.
What's the benefit of the tulip-shaped glass as opposed to just your regular glass?
So it's really just all the aromas are kind of draw up to your nose. So when you're smelling it, when you're smelling things, what you want to do is, one, you want to numb one of your senses. So number one is, you're going to kind of look a little weird, but you're going to close your eyes while you're smelling. And so you're going to bring it up to your nose and you want to smell it. But then also you want to open your mouth. So part of your sense of smell also comes from your sense of taste. So you want that smell to waft over your taste buds as well. So when you're going to kind of close your eyes and have your mouth slightly open. So it's going to look weird, but just you do it anyway.
It's like a superpower.
Yeah.
You want to deaden everything so one thing can really do its thing. And then a little trick of the trade is if you're doing whiskey, like a lot of different whiskeys or bourbons that you're smelling, there's a trick to clear your nose palate is you actually smell coffee beans. And it actually completely negates everything you've smelled, and you can actually get back in and smell whatever the next whiskey is. So always keep some coffee beans on hand when you're doing this. If you can remember to smell them after 3 whiskeys, you're doing great.
So that's the first step. The next step?
So then you really get your nose in there and pick up some flavors. You're going to get wood from the barrel. You're going to get grain from the grains that it's made from. There can be fruits and floral notes in there that can come from a barrel and from the grains just from where they grew. And then also you're also going to build up, because since they char the inside of the barrels, you're going to build up on these charred vanillins and caramel flavors that come from that sap that's been charred inside the barrel. So that's another way that you're really going to pick. That's where all that smell is coming from, is from the barrel, and then from also your fermentation, your mash, and distilling.
Kara, you once said that your family has a bourbon gene in your DNA. Can you explain?
Yeah, we do believe that everybody has a bourbon gene in their DNA, and it turns on when you turn 21. It has passed or earlier. Just don't tell anybody. But his mother passed it down to us, and we definitely caught it, and just love bourbons thanks to this guy.
I do what I can.
June 1st, 2015, you officially started making whiskey. What do you remember about that day?
It was hot. We were sweating.
No, it was a great day because we had a whole bunch of we had a huge collection of people from Richmond and Newport News to come down, present us with a grant because we were using all Virginia grains, still are, and so they presented us with a giant check, which is great, and then it gave us permission to finally start our distilling ambitions. So we were just really excited to finally get started because there was a lot of paperwork and a lot of grunt work to be done before we got it all started. And then when we finally got that permission, we were ready to hit the ground running. So let's taste.
Yeah, so on nose, we always get cherry, a lot of cherry, and
cherry.
I actually get Twizzlers, which,
And
there you go.
I think there's also like a Coca-Cola smell to it.
I said coconut, and everybody smells coconut.
No, but I mean, definitely there's cherry, coconut, or Coca-Cola cheese. Also, then there's also the, you get that oak, and then a little bit of salted caramel, which is from, as far as we can tell, we're the only bourbon distillery located on saltwater. So as our barrels age, we have a door that isn't exactly closed properly, and it has the brackish air coming off the James River.
We're backed up right against the James River up back.
And
I just was out back, and the door it's cracked, not wide enough for someone to shimmy their way through.
Yeah, don't try.
Yeah.
Great.
But now we'll taste.
Yeah.
We're taking your questions all night on Facebook and Twitter. So if you'd submit it, we have a great friends in the back who are manning the live stream. So if you ask a question, they'll write your name. We'll say your name on air, which is always a treat, and we'll pass it along to the family. We also have a live studio audience here at Ironclad Distillery Company here in Newport News, Virginia, and we'll take your questions too. And they are also enjoying Ironclad as you can see.
How long has this been in the barrel?
So all of our bourbon goes minimum of a year in 15-gallon barrels. So this has been sitting in there for at least 1 year. This is actually 14 months. So it's we will have older bourbons eventually, but to start out, we are really only working with 1 year, 14 months, 12 months around there.
We try and get it over 2 summers because you really want those barrels to expand and contract in this lovely Virginia weather we have. We're sweating in here if you can't tell. It's hot.
And you said
But
this,
if you invest in Ironclad, we'll get air conditioning.
you said this was batch number
9.
9, and why did you choose 9 as opposed to 8 or 7?
We sold all those.
What was that, Steve?
We sold all the other batches. That's all we got left.
Yeah, so 9 is the most recent one we've done. I mean, we're very proud of each batch we've done, but this is the point where we're getting to where we really finally honed in on using our equipment as efficiently as possible. And so a year ago at this time, we were really knowledgeable of what we were doing. So we really think these recent batches are some of the best we've made so far.
And if you want to try Ironclad whiskey, you can go to most A.P.C stores across the state of Virginia. They have it right there on the shelf for you. And you talked about the corn, the wheat, and the rye are all sourced just up the road, just up the James River at Rinwood Farms. Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration with Rinwood Farms?
So Rinwood Farms, our farmer's name is Dave Hula. He's an absolutely fantastic guy. He is a family-run farm. He's just kind of like our family-run distillery. And it's absolutely great having him to purvey our grains because he wins so many awards for his corn and his wheat. And it's just awesome having him provide our grains because he's done so much for us. He's really helped us out since the beginning. And he does a great job of bringing in all the grains and making sure we stay stay local in Virginia.
He actually has the title of like the National Corn Grower Association champion in
Yes.
like 6 or 7 annual time running.
And if anybody's a baker or cook or makes coffee, you know if you start with really good ingredients, you're going to end up with a really good product. So we are starting with beautiful grain, and it makes a difference.
All made right here in Virginia. There's all sorts of little particulars when it comes to whiskey, making whiskey, like whiskey laws almost. And so it can't be distilled over 160 proof, is that?
For bourbon, so all bourbon is whiskey, not all whiskey is bourbon. But yes, so in order to call your product bourbon, you have to abide by laws, which...
So bourbon is America's native spirit, which means it can only be made in America, kind of like Scotch can only be made in Scotland, otherwise it's known as single malt. Bourbon, if it's made anywhere else in the world, is just called whiskey. For bourbon to be bourbon, we can't distill it any higher than 160 proof because anything higher than 160 proof, you're basically making vodka. You're killing all the flavors you created during the fermentation process and stripping runs. So it's just kind of, it's really helping you out to make sure you're executing the most amount of flavor in your bourbon as you can possibly have.
Another one is that the mash, which is like the raw ingredients of it, can only contain 51% corn. Why 51? That seems like a strange number.
A minimum of
A
50.
minimum of 51. Thank you.
Originally bourbon was primarily just corn. It was 100% corn. And then over time, people started distilling bourbon or whiskeys using any kind of combination of grains or any percentages of grains. So at some point, the industry decided that there had to be some rules to follow, and they petitioned the federal government, and Lyndon Johnson in 1964 decreed that bourbon would have certain rules and protocols to follow. And one of those protocols was that to be called a bourbon, it had to be at least 51% corn. The other ingredients could be anything. But so it could be up to 100%.
We have a question from Facebook, from Brian from Facebook. Thanks, Brian. The question from Brian is batch number 9 different in formula or age from previous batches? Thanks, Brian, for your question.
So no, it's the same exact mash bill. We've been working with the same exact mash bill since the beginning. And so the only thing different is it's been aged at a different time of the year, kind of different time, different climate than what previous batches have been. We can't control the weather, so when it gets hotter out, the barrels enjoy that a little bit more. When it's colder out, the barrels don't do as much inside as creating a great flavored bourbon.
Thanks, Brian, for your question. Again, we're taking your questions all night on Facebook and Twitter. Let's go back to a tasting. So one thing when you taste, kind of like wine. So is there a difference, like when you taste wine, you swish it, you leave it on the tongue, on the palate? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you do not want to leave bourbon in your mouth. It will burn your mouth because it's a higher proof than wine. The heat is one of the factors in tasting, and the hotter it is in your mouth, the higher the proof is. Our bourbon is at 90 proof, so it's not going to be as hot as like cask strength, which can be like 119, 120. But there is one thing in Kentucky they call the Kentucky Chew, and you just kind of swish it around a couple times. It looks like you're a cow chewing some bourbon. I'll let Owen demonstrate so I don't look like an idiot. And then you swallow it, and you're going to get it's going to hit your tongue, and the heat is going to hit depending on what the proof is on your tongue. On ours, because we do 4 grains in our mash bill, it gets really sweet in the front, and then at the end you get that spicy kick, and that's the rye talking that you're going to get. It's like a little grenade at the end.
One of the things that I heard was when it comes to distilling, a still without a name wouldn't distill as sweet. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You have 6 stills in the back, and all 6 have a name. You've named all of them. So who wants to take that one?
Well, my mother was number 1, so she's Ruth.
Right.
And then there's Ross, and then there's Rose, and then there's Buzz, which is my wife's parents' names. And then Caroline is number 6, and I'm drawing a complete blank on
Ingrid.
Who's your other daughter-in-law?
Sorry, Inga.
I'll pay for that one.
This one comes from Ben, really my brother-in-law. Thanks, Ben, for watching on Facebook. A lot of whiskeys, question is, a lot of whiskey companies use contract distilleries to distill their product. I wanted to get your thoughts on contract distilleries and how you're different from contract distilleries. Thanks, Ben.
So every single thing we've made, every single bottle of bourbon we've made has been beginning to end started here and finished here. We have never sourced our whiskey, and it's just because we have a very big passion for wanting to make the best possible product we could make, and we didn't want to source that out to anyone else to have that caveat of someone else trying to do something for us. So we just wanted to be a beginning to end distillery, and it's the same reason, and the reason why is because we only wanted to make bourbon because that's our passion. So we really just decided to make only bourbon, and we've been working on that for the last 3 years.
A contract distillery, I take it, would be like a large corporation.
So I mean, some distilleries they start when they start their production, they want to get an aged product or a unaged product out as quick as possible. So they will buy their whiskey or their gin or their vodka from another distillery or a bigger distillery. America's biggest distillery is Midwestern Grain Products in Indiana. They do a lot of contract distilling for other distilleries. And so that's where you go, that's your starting point, and they can make a whole bunch of different mash bills for you. And then you can copy that mash bill from them, or they can make a special one for you. And then you can get that, and then you can, immediately sell it, or you can age it and then have it, it saves you some time in the future, I guess.
You're watching Facebook Live and Twitter Live with Ironclad Distillery Company. We're here on the couch with Stephen King, Kara King, and Owen King. We're tasting whiskey, we're talking about whiskey, we're talking about right now some of the particulars and the laws behind whiskey. Another one that I came across is and this one is a little confusing to me, so hopefully you can clear it up. You can only spell whiskey with an E, as in W-H-I-S-K-E-Y, with an E if the country of origin has an E in its name. Right?
Right.
You with me on that?
That's true.
So Japan, for example, makes
Whiskey.
No E.
No E.
with no E.
Right.
What do we know the origin behind that? Because that's a sort of a strange one.
I would imagine that probably originated back from the original spelling of whiskey from the Scottish, because they were the original distillers of whiskey. And since they were Scotland, they probably wanted, and they don't have an E in their name, so they were W-H-I-S-K-Y. And then I'm not sure why people started adding the E.
I read this, and I'm just gonna have to admit that I drank this memory away, so I can't answer that question. The bourbon erased it. Sorry.
Steve, do you care about the spelling? No.
Tastes the same.
So, and the final rule or law that I came across is that all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon.
So if you add coloring or flavoring, I mean, you can pretty much make whiskey the same way, but if you add any coloring or flavoring, then immediately you've taken it out of the bourbon category and you've moved it to the whiskey category. So if blackberry flavoring or anything like that, then you're making a whiskey.
Okay.
So Tennessee whiskey, for example, Jack Daniel's is
whiskey, it's not bourbon.
because it was filtered through maple charcoal. So that's a flavoring, so it's not a bourbon.
Okay. So for someone who's just starting, maybe was a beer drinker and is transitioning to drinking whiskey or bourbon, and they want to go to a bar and they want to order a drink, and they want to order a whiskey drink, what are a couple ways you could or should order a whiskey at a bar that would make you sound like you know what you're talking about?
Well, I mean, the end-all, be-all of whiskey cocktails is the old-fashioned. You know, it's one of the original cocktails, and it's absolutely one of the best. It's simple, and it lets the bourbon speak for itself, but also they add a little sweetness to it to make it a little bit more palatable for someone who's easing themselves into the kind of whiskey scene. If you're going to start with rye, go Sazerac, but an old-fashioned, if you go into a bar, you know, a good cocktail bar, an old-fashioned, you should walk in there, order that, and you know that should be easily the best cocktail you ever need.
Can you break down what's in an old fashioned?
I can. So it's usually bitters, sugar, and bourbon. You can do a little.
If a maraschino cherry comes near it, we'll
Yeah,
have to kill you.
If you do, no maraschino cherry, because that's just it's just pure sugar, not worth it. But yeah, usually it's a sugar cube that you kind of muddle up with a little bit of bitters, maybe a little water to kind of get a simple syrup going, and then just bourbon and ice, and that should be exactly what you need for a perfect bourbon cocktail.
Later on tonight, we're going to be making an old fashioned with our resident mixologist here in just a little bit.
Yeah, but if you want to turn if somebody can say, I don't like bourbon, I hate bourbon, I'll never drink it, and then they try this, and they will be converted immediately. And he's the one that came up with this.
This is really a fall drink, but apple cider and bourbon. It just, I mean, a moron like me can make it. It's only 2 ingredients, and it is just delicious. And
Ratios don't matter.
that's it.
I mean, you know, it just depends on how drunk you want to get. So if you want to go 2/3 bourbon, 1/3 apple cider, you know, let that be your poison. But
What if you didn't want to do a mixed drink? What if you just wanted to have a straight whiskey? So do you ask for no ice? Do you ask for 1 cube of ice?
you know,
Do you ask for cut it with? I mean, like how to go back to someone who's maybe just starting out.
I think the one way is drink whiskey the way you like it. I mean, if you like bourbon with Coke, I don't recommend it, but by all means, drink bourbon and soda, or drink bourbon and Coke. If you like it on the rocks, drink it on the rocks. If you really want to get the full nuanced flavors of a bourbon, you have to drink it neat, just because at that point you're going to get exactly what the distiller intended on you to have. If you want to drink it on ice, it's going to mellow out some of the flavors, going to add a little more sweetness to it because the spiciness is going to be kind of numbed. You could do that. I mean, I prefer drinking on the rocks, but
Talk about opening up.
so bourbon, like wine, does need to open up a little bit. So when you're,
Gets choked up.
Get choked up in there when I'm talking about bourbon.
And opening up.
Opening up.
He's really opening up.
So when you open up the bottle, when you open up a fresh bottle, obviously the bottle needs a little bit of time to breathe. So for example, when we're taking a sample out of a barrel, if we drink it straight out of the barrel, it's going to be super hot. It's going to be super burny. But the longer you let it sit there and get to room temperature and cool down a little bit, you're going to get these whole bunch of more flavors instead of just a raw burn. So when you're drinking bourbon, ideally don't just pop open the cork and pour it and then taste it. Give it a couple seconds, give it a minute or two to let it open up and get those full range of flavors that you really want.
Which is the same kind of principle for wine.
Yes.
Okay. Again, we're taking your questions all night, Facebook and Twitter. So hit us up and we'll read your name on the air and we'll read your question as well. What's the origin of the name Ironclad?
Go ahead.
Well, in 1862, the Monitor, which was the first or second ironclad ship, was built in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, New York. And it was made in response to the Confederates who built the CSS Virginia here in Portsmouth, or Norfolk. And the Confederates had taken a Union ship that was called the Merrimack, which was originally a sailing ship with a steam engine. And they, when the Union retreated because because Norfolk had fallen, they scuttled the ship. But they didn't scuttle it very well, and the Confederates were able to resurrect the ship. So they hired a naval architect who came in and showed them how to cut the top of the ship off and reinforce it and then clad it in 2 inches of iron casing. And when the Union found out about that, that's when they commissioned doing the Monitor with designed by Erickson. And about the same time as when the CSS Virginia, or Merrimack, was finished, the Monitor, which was on a real fast track, was sailed down from Brooklyn down through the Chesapeake, or actually out into the ocean, almost sank. And they met just right over there on the James River. And if we had been here in 1862, we would have had ringside seats to that battle. I mean, as close as you could possibly have been on land. So we were able to get, via the Mariners Museum,
If you peel back our label.
the rights to be able to use the original blueprints from the Monitor and incorporate it in our label. We would have done the Merrimack / Virginia, except that there were no prints available because it was kind of made on
It's just clad. It
As they
wasn't.
went.
Yeah, it wasn't built.
but this on our necker is a reprint from the New York Herald of the day after the battle. And the battle, they battled to a draw, so nobody really won. But the Monitor nonetheless survived much longer. The Merrimack ended up being scuttled and burnt.
And it happened just right out back. And again, so the label is really interesting and an inventive thing and something I haven't seen before. How was that? What was the design process for that? That's a question for you.
Well, this is such a cool story, and it's one of the most epic battles that the Navy has ever seen. And it changed the way that the Navy, after that, wooden ships weren't built anymore. They were clad, or they were metal. So we really wanted to tell that story through our bottle, and there's only so much space you have. And it was a battle between the government and us on getting that hinge label, but it's awesome, and it's a little Easter egg, and we're gonna do more in the tasting room when we build it out to tell that story. And the Mariners Museum has been an amazing resource. Their archives are incredible and mind-boggling of what they have. So it's kind of fun to just go in and see, like, I mean, we could reproduce the glassware that they drank on the monitor however many hundreds of years ago, and
Right.
Shut up.
Millions?
We've got a question from Facebook from Zach King. Thanks for your question, Zach. The question is, when will you be distributing nationwide?
So as soon as our crowdsourcing campaign goes through, and as long as it's as fruitful as it's been so far, it'll allow us to get it bigger still and allow us to up our production substantially. And at that point, we will be able to have a distributor that will have enough product to actually distribute and to get to other states. Because right now, we barely have enough to keep up with Virginia. You guys have been great so far.
Break open your checkbook, Zach.
Another question, thank you, Michael Greenberg from Facebook. His question on the subject of tasting bourbon: how much does temperature, room versus whiskey stones affect the taste and nuances of the bourbon?
So kind of where the whiskey stones developed was from Scotland, and they would go down to the creek and they'd grab a handful of stones, and then they would put the stones in their whiskey. And the stones, the creeks in Scotland were cool, so they would just kind of chill your whiskey down to 40 or 50 degrees. But then also a really nice thing was it wasn't diluting your whiskey. Drinking it at room temperature, it's no matter where when you're drinking it, the flavor's gonna subtly change, just because temperature is gonna allow it to, when it gets a little colder, to those fusel oils on the whiskey will kind of contract a little bit and get a little more viscous. And then when you're drinking it at room temperature, it'll be a lot more fluid, less viscous, and you're gonna kind of develop a little bit more. I mean, the flavor's gonna be subtly different, but there will be differences of flavor. Good question.
Great question. We're taking your questions all night on Facebook at Ironclad Distillery and on Twitter at Ironclad Bourbon. Also, you can click Invest in Ironclad at the top of your screen to participate in the equity crowdfunding campaign going on tonight and for several more weeks. On the top of each bottle of Ironclad, there is a yellow wax seal. Thank you. There's a yellow wax seal, and there's an imprint of an anchor. Can you talk about the process of doing that? That's a process.
Well, when one of the lessons learned in life is don't get good at something because then you're expected to do it.
Sure.
Well, he got good at waxing, so now it's his job, and he has to do all of them. So it's a pain in the neck, but it's worth it. And we love how it grabs your attention on the shelf. But go ahead.
But no, the wax stamp on top is, so the monitor had a 4-prong anchor, which was unique to that ship. And so that we kind of developed our logo from that anchor profile, and then also it has our column still on there, the 4 plates, and then kind of coming around. So it was kind of bringing both together of the monitor, or the Ironclad ship, and our still, which is our most iconic still, to kind of bring them both together.
Kara, you've done the most of the dipping with the...
No, he does all the wax because he got good at it, and we can't do it. But everything else is done by hand. That's why if you have a bubble, we just had a bad day, and I have the blisters to prove it.
We've got a couple more minutes in this segment. We have a question from Facebook from Casey Ann. When will the tasting room be open?
We have, through our equity crowdfunding campaign, have raised enough money to finally build this space out, and hopefully by the new year we will be open, and it's going to be awesome. More to come on that. Thanks, Casey.
Question from Ben Riley on Facebook. When were you thinking about starting a distillery, and what were your influences? So sort of go back in time. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the really start from the
Pour
beginning.
yourself some, because it's going to be a while.
We bought this building.
Get your handkerchiefs out, people.
We bought this building about 8 or 9 years ago, and it was much bigger than what we needed for the
Other business
that I had at the time. And when I was trying to come up with something to do with the rest of the space that would be worthwhile, I got the brilliant idea of involving my family
and you haven't looked back.
And trying to involve my family into something that they would enjoy doing, that we could all do together, and that would be kind of following in a family tradition of drinking bourbon. So we decided that it might be fun to make bourbon, and first words out of my mouth were, how hard could it be?
Don't say that.
Right.
Well, it's a little harder than we expected, but but it's been a lot of fun along the way, and challenging, and we're happy that we're making a good product.
Part B to Ben Riley's Facebook question is, hopefully you drink other types of whiskeys other than bourbon. What are some other labels or ryes or scotches that you find interesting?
So originally when we were developing our mash bill, I wanted to incorporate as much rye into the mash bill as possible, because I was more partial to, or we Goose, we were more partial to ryes, just because we like their spicier notes and the less sweetness. As we developed it, we decided we really wanted to make sure we have rye in there, because we really like that spicy note that you get at the end of your tasting. So as far as other whiskeys that we like to taste, one of our favorite distilleries is Willet. That's out in Kentucky. We think everything they do is absolutely amazing. Of the big ones, we started as Old Crow drinkers, which is below the bottom shelf. But no, we do a Whiskey Wednesday about once a month, and we'll taste whiskeys from all over the country, ryes, sometimes single malts, other bourbons, and there's things to appreciate in each whiskey, and the best quote out there is, "There's no such thing as bad whiskey, just better whiskey."
This is a Facebook question from Tim Schweitzer. Where do you see Ironclad expanding to product-wise? So
Jersey, definitely.
Product-wise.
Yeah,
product-wise. We're currently working on a white whiskey, just because we think that we could make some really good cocktails in the tasting room. With that, we currently have some other products that we've got up our sleeve that are going to be in development here shortly. We've got a straight bourbon that's going to be ready here early in 2018, and then we've also got a bottled in bond that will be ready in 2021. So when you come over to the distillery, I'll take you through my room full of patience, which is which is where the barrels go to sleep in our rick house. But that's my room full of patience, because it's where we have to let the barrels sit for at least a year, sometimes as long as 4, and eventually we'll have ones that go even longer than that.
Great, it's a good question. Another question from Facebook from Chad Miller. Other than your 4 grain, what is the next mash Ironclad intends on distilling?
Go ahead on that one.
You're the distiller.
Okay. We wanted to stay as true as possible to our 4-grain mash bill, just because we really like where that's at. Our new make, the stuff that comes right off the still, with the 4 grains is fantastic, and we really think we can develop a lot of flavor off of that, whether we age it or don't age it for our white whiskey or our aged whiskey. But that doesn't say we won't branch out eventually and try something new. But at the moment, we're very happy with what our 4-grain mash bill does for us.
Great. Thank you so much for your questions on Facebook and Twitter, at Ironclad Distillery on Facebook and at Ironclad Bourbon on Twitter. Again, you can click on your screen, Invest in Ironclad, to participate in the equity crowdfunding campaign. Got another question coming in. Thank you.
Oh, we have more. Sorry.
One final question from Facebook, Brian Ritchie. What is a white whiskey? I was thinking the same thing. I'm glad you asked, Brian.
So white whiskey is just an unaged whiskey. A lot of people would call it moonshine, although moonshine is a little different, because moonshine can be distilled with sugar in it. So that's what kind of deviates between a white whiskey and a moonshine. Ours is actually going to be more of a new make, so it's going to be the stuff that comes right off the still, but then we'll proof it down to a actually palatable level, so it won't be at like 80%, it'll be more of a 35%. So that is a white whiskey is just something that's unaged.
Is there a color variation?
So it'll be no color. They won't have that beautiful amber color. It'll be just clear liquor.
Because 100% of the color comes from the barrel. 70% of the flavor also comes from the barrel. So that barrel is key. And brings us to our next segue.
It does. We're going to talk the barrel tagging program, which is a really great invention here at Ironclad Distillery Company. And also we're going to talk about reusing bourbon barrels with Dan from Tradition Brewing. Dan's getting mic'd up right now, so he'll be on the couch in just a moment. Tradition Brewing Company is right here in Newport News, Virginia, just down the road. Dan Powell is the head brewmaster there at Tradition Brewing, and he's going to be coming up on the show in just a minute. Again, we're taking your questions all night on Facebook at Ironclad Distillery and on Twitter at Ironclad Bourbon. And again, please click on Invest in Ironclad to participate in the equity crowdfunding program. Entering on the couch, Dan, see ya.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good.
Welcome, Dan Powell, head brewmaster at Tradition Brewing Company here in Newport News, Virginia. Dan, can you talk a little bit about Tradition Brewing Company?
Yeah, Tradition Brewing Company started as an idea in my head almost a decade ago. In reality, when we started really thinking about it, was about 5 years ago, and we got off the ground about 3 years ago, and we opened a little over a year ago now.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And of course, Owen King, still on the couch, head distiller here at Ironclad Distillery Company. To me, there are few things that look cooler than an oak barrel with lettering branded on or painted onto it. Owen, you talked about it a little bit, but people are coming in to the live stream all the time. Can you talk a little bit about the barrels you use, and we'll talk to you, Dan, about?
Yeah. So we've got two different barrels. We've got barrels from Missouri and barrels from Minnesota. The barrels from Missouri, although both barrels are American white oak, the barrels from Missouri have this really strong caramel or vanilla flavor to them, and the barrels from Minnesota have this really strong caramel flavor to them. So the climate is going to affect the flavor of the wood, and it's going to kind of change whatever kind of add that flavor to whatever it's aging.
Are there a lot of is it cooperage?
It's cooperage. There are a lot more cooperages out there now than when there were when we started. Mm-hmm. When we first started, there was actually a barrel shortage just because there were so many small distilleries that had popped up, craft distilleries that had popped up, and they weren't ready for the demand of barrels. So that's the reason why today we are still using two different kinds of barrels. But it actually worked out very well because we think the blend of the two barrels together makes a fantastic flavor. So we're really happy with that. And then luckily being a bourbon distillery, we can only use the barrels once. It's another bourbon law.
Okay.
So luckily we have a wonderful brewery to give them off to next and let them make some magic in them.
So Dan, you've been aging porters
Yeah.
in Ironclad barrels. Can you talk a little bit about the partnership that you guys have?
Well, we got to know each other actually before we opened our brewery, and they were just getting going as well. So that was, about 3 years ago? 2.5, 3 years ago. There's a really great picture floating around of us somewhere. We're all standing out in the back outside the barrel room.
I think there's like 2 barrels in there.
There literally were. Yeah, I think you're right. The friendship started there. And as we opened the brewery and they got going, I remember when they released their first bottle, we literally were running, there's an A.P.C store within walking distance of the brewery, fortunately. And we use it often. And I remember we were in there, and Andy and I, one of my partners, Andy Beal, and I were buying bottles of Ironclad as soon as they were coming out of the cases and putting them on shelves. And so we sat around and we were tasting the bourbon, and the first thing we thought, Andy and I both said, is the porter is going in this barrel, because we brew a coffee porter. Mm-hmm. And the mixture of the coffee porter in that barrel with all those caramel notes, especially in the Missouri barrels coming out, is really good.
Dan and Owen, how do you transport the barrels from Ironclad to your brewery?
It's a really scientific process.
Okay.
We throw them into the car and we hope we don't get pulled over because the car immediately reeks of bourbon. And it's going to be really hard convincing someone we weren't drinking because the overwhelming smell of bourbon in the car.
Yeah.
So we drive them up, and luckily they're only a few miles away, so we drive them up there, and they're always there with their arms up in excitement. So.
Yeah, I actually think I slept with the first batch on the pallet. So we've got the barrels going now. They're sitting on a pallet. They're sitting you can actually come in the brewery and see them. They're sitting there. They're filled. They're being aged. We pulled one barrel out already. We served it at our Founders Fest, our anniversary party, and each cask just flew out the door. We also served at the Mariners Museum, and we blew that firkin in just under an hour and a half, which was phenomenal.
And won the award.
Yep.
How much whiskey is left in the barrel when you get it?
So when we've weighed the barrels when they were empty, like when they had nothing in them, to when the point where after we emptied them, and they're about 10 to 20 pounds heavier afterwards. So the staves of the wood actually holding a substantial amount of bourbon, and he sees that by his proof goes up when he puts his beer in there.
Yeah, we take a 5% beer and it jumps up to somewhere around 6.5, 7, 8. Depends on how we blend it.
And what's the yield? How much porter do you get per barrel?
Well, interestingly enough, just like they do, we actually cause the barrels to flex and to pump that beer in and out through the staves and pull as much bourbon into that as we can, because bourbon and beer. So we do move them around the brewery in different areas. But when we're done, depending on how long we leave it in there, there's natural evaporation, just like they have up through the wood. And we put in 15 gallons. We top it right up to the top, and we probably lose 3-4 gallons over the time, depending on how long we age it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get it. What's the process of getting the porter out of the barrel and into the customers?
Well, we do it just like the wine industry does. We pump CO2 in on top of the beer. It pushes up this pipe and out, and we move it over to a small little bright tank. And then from there, it goes into the kegs. Either we keg it or we put it into a firkin and we naturally carbonate it in the firkin, or the small kegs that you see. Typically, we carbonate it. Right now, there are handprints and nose prints at the window where those barrels are. Nowhere else in the brewery, except we have to clean every day to see.
We're taking your questions on Facebook and Twitter all night. If you have a question for Dan or for Owen or for anyone here. Dan, I was looking around for some samples of the porter. Did you bring samples?
I did bring one. I think they're running to look for it now.
Oh, okay.
If Owen didn't funnel it down. But there's a bottle floating around here somewhere. We'll get it.
We have a question on Facebook from Brian Burnham. Thanks for your question, Brian. While the 375 milliliter bottles make a handy single serving.
Yeah, it's adult size shot.
Are there plans for selling Ironclad in larger bottles? That is a great question, Brian. Thank you.
So our straight bourbon, which will be released early 2018, that will be only in 750s. Also, our white whiskey will only be in 750s as well. So yeah, we do understand that 375s are not the greatest for cocktail parties. But eventually we will be able to get to the point where we will have bigger bottles for more than one drink at a time.
Dan, Tradition Brewing Company, are you guys you have a canning or a bottling program?
Well, we fortunately this year we're putting in our canning line this year, and on top of that we're also getting a bottle filler, so we can do specialty runs like these, like the Bombers or some of the more kind of champagne style bottles that we'll release at certain times during the year. Some of the special things, like the bourbon barrel porter, should definitely go into a nice bomber like this. Mm-hmm.
All right, Owen, so talk about what you're experiencing now.
So I mean, right up front on the nose, I can smell Ironclad just right up front. I'm also getting cinnamon, and then there's the coffee as well. So the greatest thing is, it's another just vehicle of being able to drink bourbon, especially Ironclad. So it just works out very well like that.
Yeah.
It's a great color.
Yeah.
As you enjoy those, we have a question from Andrew Beal from Facebook. When can I get some of that bourbon barrel coffee porter? It's a question for you, Dan. Thank you, Andrew.
Andy, since you're a co-owner with me in the brewery, if I catch you with a wine thief in the back, there's going to be we're going to have a discussion. The bourbon barrel porter, we'll be releasing it this fall.
This fall.
Yeah, it's going to be coming out. We liked it. It's a great drink for the fall, and it fits nicely into our fall lineup, which is my favorite time of year in there, some of the things we get to do. But this will be coming out in the fall. We're actually aging this for about, it's about 4 or 5 months it's going to be in there.
Thank you.
And pulling all that that bourbon out that I haven't already kind of sucked out before. So
We've got a question from Facebook from Michael Greenberg. Thank you, Michael, for your question. Will there be any volunteer operations for those of us interested in helping out and learning more about the distilling process? So any volunteer opportunities for people out there? Thank you, Michael.
So yeah, I mean, we get that question a lot whenever someone comes through here, because I obviously learning how to distill is a pretty cool thing, because you can't home distill. You can home brew all you want, but you cannot home distill. So no, once we get everything up and running here, as far as tasting room and distillery store going, yeah, we are definitely open for having people coming through and doing a distilling day with us, or kind of just coming out, asking us any questions they might have. Yeah, we're open to once we have everything up and running, we will have a complete open door policy. Come through anytime, and we'll try to be here as often as we can to help you out.
I mean, there's lots of beer fests going on. Are there opportunities?
oh yes, absolutely. Enjoy, guys. I could just see them starting to crawl over the back of the chairs.
I mean, brew fest, wine fests are all over the place now. They're certainly popular and they're great. Are there whiskey fests where you could pour, where people could come?
Yeah, actually, this year will mark the second annual Craft Spirits Fest in Roanoke. So what it is it has all the craft distilleries of Virginia, or almost all of the craft distilleries of Virginia, going to the convention center in Roanoke. And we'll have tastings and a cocktail. We will also this will be the first year ever since legislation changed that you can actually go to a tasting event and buy a bottle at the same point. So it'll be kind of like going to a wine fest or a brew fest, where you can actually buy a bottle. And either, I'm not sure if you can you consume it there or not. Yeah, so it's just you can buy and take with you. Well, could be a hard weekend.
Yeah.
We've got a. Go ahead.
But no, so that's the one. I'm not. There's a beer and bourbon bacon festival in Virginia Beach, and I'm not sure if they're doing. I mean, we won't be there, but there will be a whole bunch of other bourbon distilleries. But I'm not sure if they will have the opportunity to buy bottles.
Are you going to be at the Roanoke event?
We will be at the Roanoke event.
We have a question from Inga King from Facebook. Thank you, Inga, for your question. Augusta would like to know which cheese pairs well with Ironclad. Is this an inside joke?
No. So bourbon really plays well with anything that has fat to it. So any kind of cheese that is has a buttery texture to it. So like say Saint Andre, it's a really buttery kind of brie cheese. It would go very well with that. There's a whole bunch of really good anything that has a substantial amount of fat to it or a fatty flavor to it. That would be where bourbon would play best with.
Dan, Tradition Brewing Company. If people go to Newport News and visit the brewery, what will they see? What can they taste? What's currently on tap?
Oh wow! So we have. Typically, we have anywhere from 8 to 12 on tap, and we so much so that we've actually run out. We're rebrewing a lot of things right now. Summer's been great. We have cores. We have 2 different IPAs. We have a standard IPA. We have a double IPA, a whole 488, and Continental Divide, respectively. We have a cream ale, which a lot of people don't have. We have an American Pale Ale right now, Sounder, which was the beer that actually started all of this. For Oktoberfest, we'll have 6 different beers on specific 3 ales and 3 lagers, specifically for Oktoberfest. Kolsch, Weizen, our Oktoberfest beer, an Alt, our Pilsner, and something new that I'm going to hold back that we're not quite announcing yet. Everybody can kind of
Do I have to stop by later this week?
I think you probably should. Yeah. So those are Oktoberfest. We also have our oatmeal stout coming back. That was very popular. We have our Christmas offering that'll be coming out. Those are 2 surprises. We always like gifts that we unwrap for Christmas.
Sure. Yeah. Dan, if people want to find out more about Tradition Brewing Company, how can they find out more information about it?
Well, it's traditionbrewing.com, really simple. We're on Facebook as well, of course, at Tradition Brewing Company. So definitely check us out there. And that's where you get to get all the updates about what's going on at the brewery, what the new beer releases are, what our hours are, what food trucks we're going to have pairing with our beer that night.
Owen, can you talk about the barrel tagging program? Because this is something that's unique to Ironclad.
So we wanted people to be able to follow where their bourbon has gone. So this is an idea my sister came up with, And so every barrel we have, we stamp on the back or on the bottom, and it has a special number. And each bottle will have a special number on it to tell you which batch or which bottle it's or which barrel it came from. And so if you submit that number into our website, it'll lead you to an email list that will tell you where that barrel has gone. So you can look up if that barrel's gone to tradition, if that barrel went down to Kill Devil or Outer Banks Distilling in the Outer Banks, which is doing rum. We've got barrels up at Virginia Distilling Company, who is doing their single malt. We've got a cidery in Yorktown that is also or not a cidery, a meadery in Yorktown that is aging their mead in our barrels. So the greatest thing is if you really like that bottle you had and you want to see where it's gone, you can put that number in and you can find out where it's gone. And you can go taste that bottle again with whatever that other purveyor has done, whether it be tradition or another distillery or another brewery.
Great. You're watching the Facebook Live feed of Ironclad Distillery Company here in Newport News, Virginia. I'm taking your questions all night on Facebook and Twitter. We're going to step aside for just a moment. We're going to talk to some mixologists and talk about how to make the perfect summer cocktail using Ironclad bourbon. Again, we're going to take your questions all night long. We've got some studio audience here enjoying Ironclad whiskey. We have some people manning the computer. Questions on Facebook at ironcladdistillery.com and Twitter at ironcladbourbon. Again, you can participate in the equity crowdfunding program by clicking the link. There should be a link if you're on Facebook at the very top of the screen that says Invest in Ironclad to be part of their equity crowdfunding campaign, which is one of the many reasons we're here tonight. Coming up in the next segment in just a moment, we're going to meet Robert Gregory, who is a mixologist at Finn Seafood right down the road in Newport News, Virginia, as well as Matt Jones, who is the creator of Craft and Artisan Cocktail Ice, which is a beautiful thing that I just saw for the first time tonight. He's the owner of Chisel and Shaker, which is a new a brick and mortar store located here in Newport News. So we're going to find out how to make a perfect summer cocktail with Robert Gregory and with Matt Jones. Okay. Okay. We have some great audience members who've been enjoying Ironclad bourbon. Does anyone have any questions for Owen or for anyone else? No? Sure.
I got one. Now, obviously, you said you're only aging for 12, 14 months right now. A lot longer aging to come. Have you squirreled away any barrels for yourself to see how they're going to be in about 5, 8 years?
So with the 15-gallon barrels, there's a certain point where you can over oak them, so we can't take those any further. But that's why we have the barrels that are going to go 4 years plus. So we have barrels that we're going to kind of let sit in there for a while and kind of see how great they can become.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You mentioned in bond, and we've been drinking over here, so we may not have heard the definition of in bond. I don't know exactly what that means. What do you mean by bond?
So for bottle and bond, what it really so that law predates the bourbon law that was enacted by LB or Lyndon B. Johnson. So what the Bottle and Bond Act stated was during the late 1800s, there were a lot of people that were making fake bourbon. They were coloring it with molasses or adding just a whole bunch of nasty stuff in there to make it seem older than what it actually was. So what the Bottle and Bond Act did was it put a statement on that this was looked over by the United States government and was made by a single distiller over a single distilling season, and it was in the barrel for no less than 4 years, and it also went into the bottle no less than 100 proof. So this was a whole bunch of guidelines they made to actually make bourbon have a stringent law to make sure they were actually making bourbon. So that's what our Bottle and Bond is, because we want it to be. It's no longer observed or watched by the government, but we will still abide by all those rules.
And your straight bourbon has to be in for 2 years?
Minimum 2 years, yep. So and that'll be ready here early 2018.
All right, we're going to walk on over. Here at the bar, we have Robert Gregory, mixologist at Finn Seafood, right down the road in Newport News. He's been named the most innovative mixologist in Hampton Roads, Virginia. He's been in the industry for 20 years. He's been a bartender for much of that time. He's done national campaigns for Hennessy, Jägermeister, and Heaven Hill. And his cocktail recipes have been published all the way from Los Angeles to London. Down the bar, just a piece, we have Matt Jones, creator of Craft and Artisan Cocktail Ice and the owner of Chisel and Shaker. Fellas, thanks for being here. What are we going to be doing tonight?
We're going to do some classic cocktails for you, so we really want to make the bourbon shine because that's the star of our show. So we're going to do an old-fashioned, like Owen mentioned, perfect drink to kind of lift up the flavor of those bourbons and something that easy, everybody can sip on, anybody can make. So a really good one. And then we're going to take it back to the history of the Ironclad and do some grog, which was very popular on the ships back in the day. So we're going to shake up a couple drinks for everybody here. But right now we're going to stir up an old-fashioned for you. So we're going to go 1.5 ounces of the Ironclad bourbon. We're going to do a rich, simple syrup for 1 ounce. Then we're just going to dash some bitters in there. Just give it a little spice, a little bit of flavor. It's kind of what gives the cocktail the backbone. We'll give it a nice stir just to kind of dilute it so it's not so rough around the edges so that everybody can enjoy it, be it mom, dad, grandma, anybody. Perfect drink to sip on. So Ironclad for me has a little bit of grapefruit notes on it. So I like to use grapefruit oils from the peel just to kind of pull out some of those flavors. Makes a really nice drink. For the next drink. There we go. Cheers.
Beautiful. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a perfectly spherical ice cube in there. That is perfectly clear ice. It's the best. And it's a fantastic cocktail. Nice and sweet, but it's still got the Ironclad shows through. And you can go to Finn. You can get this made by Robert or Matt. It's an awesome, awesome drink. It's fantastic, and I will not share this.
So, Robert, what was the name of the drink again?
That's an old-fashioned. That's the Ironclad old-fashioned right there. That's something that once the tasting room's up and going, they'll be offering in this very spot. So, I mean, that's definitely one we're proud of. You know, that's the most popular cocktail in America. It's the American drink right there. So
Less is more.
Yep.
So Matt Jones, your specialty is ice, and we see the gorgeous piece of ice that we have in the glass. Can you talk about what you do, your experience with ice, and all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, with the, when I started working with Rob, I was just incredibly impressed with how much work he puts into these cocktails. And, so often you see all this work put into the cocktail and not so much into the ice. And it ends up being, shaken or stirred drink, you got about 25% of your cocktail is going to be water from ice, which always surprised me. And we started doing this clear ice program at Finn, slowly at first, trying to make it in the restaurant and coolers and various makeshift ways. And I kind of just became obsessed with it and started looking for ways to kind of reproduce it. It's clear because of the gases that are normally trapped inside of ice when they're frozen normally. Of course, the way that we produce it is frozen slowly from the bottom up on a freezer plate with pumps agitating the gases out of the water. So you get a denser product, it melts slower. Also, we put it through reverse osmosis, kind of really high quality, filter. So you get, no alternate flavors affecting this gorgeous product. That's really what it's all about, is highlighting, these insane local products, and you don't want anything taking away from it. In fact, you want to highlight it, and that is the goal we've set out to do. I think we're on our way.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I mean, right on that same level is, spherical ice is the best way if you're going to drink your bourbon on the rocks. Spherical ice, it melts slower. It only dilutes your whiskey a little bit while you're drinking it. It usually lasts for 2 to 3 drinks, sometimes 4. So it's absolutely the best to use if you're going to drink on the rocks to get a spherical cube like this.
How do you make a spherical cube of ice?
There's many different ways of doing it. You can do, there's a lot of really nice, craftsmen doing it by hand in the bar. You can do it with a drill press these days, actually. You can just bang them out really quick. They make a really cool bit for it. Looks kind of like a trident. The way we do it, just for now, starting off, you can get these through many different purveyors, is just an aluminum sphere mold. And it's just a CNC cut piece of aluminum that pulls all the moisture from pulls all the temperature from the ice and just kind of creates this really nice sphere. They're actually, I believe they make these that do any number of shapes these days. I saw a diamond one online the other day. They make one that does a skull. I'm really hoping to get that in the future. Absolutely. The sphere is the go-to because, like Owen said, it's definitely it's slow melting, keeps the product cold without diluting it, and also you get, interestingly, a lot of refractory light from the sphere as well. It's a really effective prism. So you can really enjoy the colors that they put into this product. You can really get that nice kind of amber glow. It is quite warm in here. It's a bit warped at the moment. That was a swan when it started.
Robert Gregory at Finn Seafood, mixologist at Finn Seafood. Talk a little bit about the restaurant and what you do at Finn Seafood.
We've been known in the area for having the best seafood, so we specialize in local products. The chef we work for, Kenny Sloan Jr., is an amazing award-winning chef. He's a master gardener. He's also recognized as one of the best chefs in America, which not too many chefs in this area have that title. The food there is incredible. The customer service is the best part of the meal, in my opinion. We also try to make the drinks, as exciting or up to the caliber of the food. So that's kind of where it all started.
Also Mixology Mondays.
Yeah, we definitely do a craft cocktail night every Monday night. We've got 2 original new cocktails every week for $10. So, you're not beating that with a stick. Best deal in town.
Absolutely.
Are we making another drink?
We got one more drink for you. We're going to do the grog, perfect summertime sipper. So we're playing off the old-timey, the sailors would be fighting scurvy. They'd get a ration of rum or bourbon to kind of combat that, and it wasn't really working. They just ended up getting really drunk. So they ended up cutting that with water and lime, and that's kind of where the daiquiri came from, adding sugar to it. But originally, the grog was the sailor's best friend on the ship. So we want to play into that with the Monterey Merrimack theme, and just kind of get in there and do something that's easy to drink for summer. So we're going to use some of our bitters. We're using some local chamomile tea, apple cider, and fresh pressed grapefruit. And of course our Ironclad bourbon. And give it a nice little shake. And more beautiful ice from Chisel and Shaker. A little bit of fresh nutmeg, just kind of shaved on top. We're going to use a dehydrated apple for our garnish.
Looks beautiful.
Cheers.
It's got to
Beautiful
be edible,
classic
look
grog.
good, and hopefully taste as good as it looks.
So this will be another cocktail that we'll have at the distillery at all times. One of our original cocktails when we have our tasting room open, and I can promise you this is going to be delicious.
Sláinte.
Nice and appley, but Ironclad still shows through. It's kind of like my dad was talking about earlier, a bourbon and cider. This is just that kicked up to a completely different level, and it's just still delicious, easily made at home. It's fantastic.
Matt, if people want to find out more about Chisel and Shaker, where can they go?
Actually, our website should be launching soon. We got the name, chiselandshaker.com. Not too complicated. It's the whole thing, chiselandshaker.com. You go on there. We are getting it up and running. And you can, it's a bit rough and going at the moment, but we'll answer any questions you can. Yeah, you got to stop by the store in the Denby Warwick Shopping Center. They got that new incredible go-kart arena in the Breakout Center. We're right next to Sunrise Donuts. Good donuts.
No plug for Sunrise.
Go to the Sunrise, and you will find the cold frozen water for sure.
Great. And Robert Gregory, if people want to find out more about you.
You can definitely check me out at Finn Seafood. I'm there 5 days a week, always there on Monday nights. You can look on Instagram at BobbyJoeGregs11. Other than that, you can come down to the distillery. I'm here every now and then. So.
Great. You can go on your screen right now, click on Invest in Ironclad to participate in the Ironclad Distillery Company's equity crowdfunding campaign. All right. We got a question coming in. Thank you so much. From Facebook, from Ron Rankin. This is for you, Owen. Are you ever going to shave?
This is what the ladies like, so so no, I have to keep this. I was married to it, so she made me keep it from forever now. So sorry about that, Coach.
Frames your face.
That's great. We're taking your questions all night long here on Facebook at Ironclad Distillery and on Twitter at Ironclad Bourbon. The grog was interesting. The grog was named for, and Robert, you can tell me, you can chime in on this. The grog was named for like a naval captain, and the grog was an actual type of like material that.
So
like
yeah,
the weave.
the way it kind of started was it started with the English Navy. The English Navy used rum, and then as soon as the Americans adopted it, we didn't have rum because we didn't have molasses to make rum, and the first distillation in America was corn liquor. So they were using what they had, so they were making corn liquor. There's a poem that goes with it, and it's 3 parts.
Here we go.
Hold on. 1 part sour, 2 parts sweet, 3 parts strong, 4 parts weak. And so that's when Robert was alluding to that when they were diluting it down with water. But then also, they had to help fight scurvy. They were having the sour from the limes or lemons, and then the 3 parts strong is from the whiskey or rum they were using. And then the sweet would always be simple syrup or sugar or something like that to kind of make the cocktail.
Robert, why a dehydrated apple?
It just looks good. I mean, it's pulling out the flavors on there. It's something that you can kind of eat, but it's also a kind of neat little conversation piece.
Yeah.
Kind of complements, goes with the rustic theme of the nutmeg on top.
Nice. Nice.
No, it works out very well. Cocktail is amazing. You'll all enjoy it when you come down here.
This beautiful bar, we should take a minute to talk about the bar for a minute. Can we talk about the bar, Owen?
Absolutely. So this is our cash wrap, actually. So this is where you're going to. So the area we're standing in right now will essentially be our distillery store. So it will actually be an A.P.C store where you can come down, you can buy a bottle of either our normal small batch bourbon or any of our one-offs that will only be available here in the distillery store only. And so this is our bar made by Andy Newton, who's got Andy Newton Customs. He takes down barns throughout Virginia and uses the reclaimed wood. So the top is from a 100-year-old barn in Smithfield. The cedar shakes we put on the siding just because it was my sister's idea. She thought it looked good. She thought it looked good, and I think it looks fantastic. And then it's also just a really nice. It's a very nice conversation piece, and it also provides us everything we need for the distillery store. Eventually, Andy will help us with, our cocktail bar and our bar, and it'll be on in the same room, but kind of another great piece that will look original to the place. It won't be a modern bar. It'll be traditional with the look of it doesn't look out of place in our 100-year-old building.
And Andy and his wife have been manning the live feed all night. So
they're doing a great job.
Thanks to them. Thank you. They're nice. That's a nice story. All right. We're going to bring on Kara King, a creative director of Ironclad Distillery Company right now, to sort of wrap up the show and to sort of talk a little bit about the behind-the-scenes things that are going on in the distillery, sort of what we have in place, and then what should be coming up later on down the line.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about it that much, but we are in the middle of I'm on mute. Hold on, please.
So Kara King is creative director here at Ironclad Distillery, in charge of all the social media, talking about behind the scenes things coming up?
So we didn't really talk about it, but we are in the middle of a equity crowdfunding campaign, which means that you can actually invest in our distillery and become part owner of our distillery, which is awesome if you've ever wanted to do that. And we promise to treat you well, and you can join our family, and once a year we'll get together and share ideas and drink bourbon and tell good stories and have a lot of fun. But that equity crowdfunding campaign that we're running right now is actually going to help fund building out this space, which is going to be awesome when it's finished, by the new year, hopefully. But this building was built in 1913. It used to be an old dry goods warehouse, and there used to be a railroad that came right behind the building. And they would just open these huge steel doors that we have and unload everything from the train right into the building, which is why it's freezing in the summer. I mean, freezing in the summer, freezing in the winter, and really hot in the summer. But there was a grocery store attached that a lot of Newport Newsians used to shop at. And so we're just trying to maintain the integrity of this space, but bring in this rustic luxe atmosphere with chandeliers and old rugs and beautiful furniture, and it's going to be a lot of fun to just come and relax. And we'll also be able to pour 3 ounces per person per day so we can make cocktails.
Okay.
And this lovely man is coming up with our cocktail menu, and he's going to do spins on classics and something you've never tasted, and just awesome stuff. So it'll change seasonally, and we are going to build a garden in the back called the Cocktail Garden that will grow mint and all the garnishes that we're going to use. And we also are going to start a cocktail club where you can become a member, and once a month there will be a cocktail waiting just for you that we've tailored towards your tastes. That could be barrel aged or new or a classic. You'll never know until you come in and get it.
And to make all of that possible, to join the family, you can click at the top of your screen, invest in Ironclad to become part of the family here at Ironclad Distillery Company. One of the great things that will happen is that you can buy, as you mentioned, you can buy Ironclad right here at the distillery, which is available. You can buy Ironclad right now at your local A.P.C store across Virginia, which is great, but it'll be nice to have sort of like a home base. For it.
And we actually just we're certified as a distillery store, so soon you'll be able to come here and buy a bottle directly from our distillery, and we will release products that are only sold here. And restaurants and bars can come here and buy it, and so this is your new home station to come and get a drink.
Yeah, merchandise, T-shirts, all kinds of things. There's
bourbon related, Ironclad related.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Again, click at the link at the very top of your screen, invest in Ironclad to become part of the Ironclad family. Yeah. Thanks, Kara.
Thank you. I have one more thing. It's my Aunt Lori's birthday, and I hope she's still watching, but happy birthday, Aunt Lori. You're the best aunt a girl could ask for.
So thanks so much for watching the live stream, the first ever live stream here at Ironclad Distillery Company in Newport News, Virginia. I'm Andrew Paul Cronin. I host the podcast, The Q&A with A.P.C. at QAAPC. If you want to listen to my show, visit ironcladdistillery.com, invest in Ironclad, and stay tuned for our next live streaming event, which is should be coming up, sometime down the line.
I know.
Thanks.
Thank you for doing this.
Thanks. Thank you.
You've
Thanks
been
for having
great.
me. Thanks, Kara. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And to everybody that made this possible, you guys are awesome. Thank you. Is it over?
It's just like 6-second little thing with a check mark, and I don't know if it's still.
This is Andrew Paul Cronin, and you've been listening to the Q&A with A.P.C. To hear archived episodes, visit QAAPC.com. For exclusive content, including upcoming shows, behind-the-scenes pictures, and more, follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at QAAPC. The executive producer of the Q&A with A.P.C. is Ben Riley. The music was arranged by Soup.